For all of you out there watching, if you're not watching now, you're not able to get us live right now. Hopefully you'll be able to watch this later on both YouTube and Facebook and Instagram once it's done. I just wanted to welcome all of you to the town hall with the two Democratic candidates in Rhode Island's Congressional 2nd District. Congressman Jim Langevin, who is seeking re-election to an 11th term in the United States House of Representatives, and Dylan Conley, who is a lawyer, family man, current chair of the Providence Board of Licenses. I'll let both of them introduce themselves in just a moment. But before I get to that, I want to remind everyone watching of some very important dates for this year's election season. September 8th is the primary that you will be voting in for these two gentlemen. If you want to vote by mail in that primary, you have a few more days to get a ballot, print a ballot up, and send that off to the Secretary of State. The deadline for voting by mail is August 18th. So if you want to do that, please do that within the next 5 days. Unfortunately, the deadline to register to vote for the primary has already passed. So if you're not registered, you can't vote in the primary, but you should definitely register for the election on November 3rd. The deadline for that is October 4th. So please make sure you register. You can register online, Secretary of State's website for the November 3rd election. And there's also a ballot, a mail-in form to get a mail-in ballot for the general election as well, if you want to do that. On top of all that, as great it is to be able to get in all your mail-in forms, there's also early in-person voting in Rhode Island. If you want to vote starting now for the primary, or actually, I'm sorry, not starting now, starting after the 18th, because there's still the time to get your mail-in ballot in. If you want to start voting for the primary from August 19th until the primary on September 8th, or in the general election from October 14th to October 2nd, you just go to your town hall, Board of Canvassers, show your photo ID, you get a ballot, they scan it the same way as they do in the polls. So you can do that at any time during that period. And all of this is at vote.sos.ri.gov, which I will link up wherever I post this video. So with all that out of the way, thank you both for sitting through all that, which I'm sure you all know by heart, and you've probably done it as well, that small lecture. I welcome you both to the town hall tonight. I'm calling it a town hall, not a debate, because I want to think of this more as a conversation. Clearly, we want to hear how the two of you views on policy may differ, but it's much more of a conversation, especially since you're both from the same party. With that in mind, I'm not going to be doing like a countdown timer or any sort of clocker like that when I ask you questions. I'm going to alternate between the two of you to ask a question. Who goes first? I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to answer the question. If I do feel you're getting wordy, knowing both of you, I don't really see that happening. But if I do feel you're getting wordy, I'll politely interrupt after 2 to 3 minutes, and then allow the other person to also have 2 to 3 minutes to answer, and then offer a chance for anyone to respond if they feel it. Not a strict clock, but you understand. The reason for the brevity and why I'm rushing through some of this at the beginning is it's amazing as I started to put together all these documents just how much food and drink covers. I mean, I know it working in it every day, but when you start to write it all down, there's the economic impact, the health issues, there's social issues with insecurity. Climate can impact farming and even security, and then there's of course hunger and sourcing food. So all of that is up for grabs today. And then, of course, with the pandemic being on, all of that is even more laid bare and further. So with all of that out there, I'd like both of you to take a minute to introduce yourselves in an opening statement. I flipped a coin for you, had my daughter pick, so it was completely random. Dylan, you won the coin toss. So
thank you. Again, my name is Dylan Conley. I'm running for Congress in the 2nd District. I am an attorney by trade. I represent a series of municipalities, Johnston, Wesley, do a bit of work for the Warwick Town Council, Wesley Johnston School District, chairman of the Providence Board of Licenses, and I'm an assistant solicitor in East Providence. I did the math the other day. I've done about 1,200 public hearings in the last 4 years. So I know local government front and back. And I'm a small business owner. My wife and I rent out some units and some real estate that, a couple, 3 families that we have. We live on the 1st floor in one of them. And, a bit of a law practice on my own and both with my father. So that's me.
Thank you. Congressman?
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And I want to begin by thanking you, Dave Dakian, and Eat Drink Rhode Island for hosting this town hall tonight. I'm looking forward to the discussion on this very important topic surrounding Rhode Island's food economy. Um, and I have to warn everybody, if you haven't had dinner yet, you're probably going to get a little hungry before we're done. So tonight we're going to talk about the great culinary experiences available here in Rhode Island and our outstanding food scene, which we're all very proud of. So with our world-class restaurants, our outstanding culinary talent and accessibility to fresh produce and seafood from local farms and fisheries and markets, I'm sure you'd all agree that Rhode Island really does punch way above its weight when it comes to food. So we all know that our food industry is a vital piece really of our identity in so many ways, helping to attract visitors and creating employment for our friends, for our neighbors, and adding to the vibrancy of our communities. In fact, the culinary scene is really so important to the Ocean State that I established a food first advisory committee a couple of years ago, composed of local food and drink leaders, so that I'm always plugged in and understanding what the issues are in the forefront of this industry, and that I'm ready to help. So unfortunately, as we all know right now, the food industry has not been spared by the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, this industry has really been hit harder than most, and the livelihoods of the hardworking people who help keep this sector moving right now are threatened. As your congressman, I'm keeping the health and financial well-being of Rhode Island families and workers and small business owners front and center in my mind with each decision that I make. And it's why I voted for several Corona relief packages that include billions in federal aid to help families put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads, keep workers who have lost their jobs afloat, and keep the doors of our mom and pop shops and restaurants open. And finally, I just want to say I'm also very proud to have co-sponsored the Restaurant Act, specifically to help with a $120 billion restaurant stabilization grant program designed to help independent restaurants. So obviously a lot of work remains to ensure that we recover and come out stronger from this crisis. I remain as committed as ever to fight tirelessly to preserve our food ecosystem and help Rhode Islanders weather this storm. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Well, since I wanted to start with economy as well, and you touched on a bunch of things there, that's certainly the topic that most people who sent in questions had questions for. As you mentioned, there were the stimulus packages passed by Congress so far. The third is being hotly discussed and debated for about 2 months now, which I know the House passed a great bill, and hopefully the Senate can work that out. So the CARES Act, which was passed back in April, allocated $1.25 billion to Rhode Island for emergency use, and currently the state is planning on using $50 million for small grants to small businesses. The SBA EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, also offers small grants to small businesses, and that was part of, if it wasn't part of CARES, it might have been part of the act before that. I wanted to ask both of you your thoughts on the grant programs. Congressman, you mentioned the Restaurant Act. I'd like to hear a little bit more about why you think that is something that you're sponsoring, and Dylan, if you want to talk about programs of that nature as well. Congressman, if you want to start, please.
Sure. Well, the Restaurants Act is introduced by and sponsored by my colleague Earl Blumenauer, and the bill has right now about 171 co-sponsors, and the bill would provide a $120 billion fund for basically revitalization of the restaurant industry. As I said, they've been hit particularly hard because they really depend on customers being able to come into their restaurants. As we know, both in Rhode Island and across the country, they are now limited capacity, and both being able to have people come into the restaurants at only a fraction of their capacity right now, and or they can serve people outside. You have to have obviously social distancing both inside and outside. My concern, of course, is right now the weather is great, a little warm, but obviously everybody likes eating outside, and that's easy to accommodate right now. But I'm concerned about the fall. This pandemic isn't gonna go away just because summer is over. In fact, health experts are saying that we're particularly worried about what's going to happen in the fall, since we know this virus is airborne right now, and public health experts, medical experts are saying that the droplets can hang in the air for quite some time. Being indoors is going to be a real challenge, which means I'm concerned that the restaurant industry is going to be hit again even harder once the fall gets here. So this $120 billion fund would be specific to helping the restaurant industry to weather this storm in the same way that it would be a grant program like the PPP program. It would provide grants to restaurants and others areas of culinary so that they'd be able to keep the doors open and keep their heads above water, which is what we need to do, because this is both a public health crisis and an economic crisis. We want to get through the health crisis, but we don't want to have a devastated economy at the other end. And that's what I'm concerned about. We have to do both, battle the health crisis, but also help our businesses, especially these mom and pop restaurants that we all love, to get through the economic crisis as well.
Thank you. Helen?
Sure. So I think the thing about the Restaurant Act is that for a lot of businesses, it's too little too late. There's already a series of businesses and restaurants that have closed. They've gone out of business. One of my favorite places down the street from my house, Louis Fuller's, just closed shop. I was speaking with a woman in the arcade the other day, a place I've been getting lunch at for years. And when I asked her how she was doing, her eyes welled up. That was the only answer I needed. The problem is that the PPP loan failed restaurants. The PPP loan, the incentive structure was based on the size of the loan being given out. So what happened is bankers ran to large corporations and said, hey, you qualify for a PPP loan. Now, what we could have done, what Congress could have done is set it up so the PPP loan, the incentive was based on the number of loans given. That would have had banks running to small mom and pop restaurants to make sure that they got the PPP loan, because they would have gotten their money based on the number of loans given out instead of simply the size of the loans. If that happened, people are walking up and down Westminster, Broad, and Main Streets across the country, making sure that mom and pop places are getting bailed out. They're getting the PPP loan that they deserve. But that's really only a temporary solution. Anyone that works in the industry knows that the margins were too tight for too long, well before the pandemic hit. And that's really an issue of the economy as a whole. Our economic systems are set up in such a way that it's difficult for people to have enough money to go out to eat. Not as many people go out to eat as often as they wish. And the margins in the restaurant industry itself are very tight. That's really a result of our entire economic system. Now, if you think about how tight those margins were before the pandemic, and you recognize the fact that no matter what we do, there will be a decrease in the population that goes out to eat on a going forward basis, probably for many years. Those margins won't work. That math won't work. It particularly won't work for independent restaurants. Large scale restaurants and chains have access to finances that local places do not. The thing about local places is that's what makes everything great. That's what makes a place. That's what makes Providence, Providence. That's what makes Rhode Island, Rhode Island, right? The places that you can't get anywhere else. They're in the greatest jeopardy. And I'm deeply concerned that unless we have serious large-scale economic change, which gives working families more access to income so they can spend more money in the local economy, and we decrease the costs on restaurants, the restaurant industry, especially the independent restaurants, are at risk now and for the long term.
Thank you. Congressman, anything you wanted to add to that? Or?
So just to add that there were two phases to the PPP program, and they have been vital. That's both the initial PPP program and the extension when the money ran out so quickly, and then we voted in Congress to replenish that fund. PPP was a vital lifeline for so many businesses and helping them to keep their heads above water right now. It didn't solve all the problems, and we really need to do another round, both of stimulus, direct payments to individuals, but also help with another round of PPP if at all possible. Again, it's helping. It's not the perfect solution, but we wanted to keep the family, if you will, intact, the workers for a particular company or restaurant intact, so that even if they were paid to stay home, people were still on the payroll but also once obviously the public health officials opened up when they gave the go-ahead and said we could reopen, that businesses were going to be able to have their workforce intact, be able to get up and running again. So it was a good first effort. We need to do more. That's why the Restaurants Act, I think, is important. But I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get another round of stimulus through, and that will, again, further help small businesses.
Yeah, I'm going to skip ahead since Dylan kind of brought it up, and it's a topic that I've been thinking about a lot, but it remains within the business topic. There's two parts of what I want to talk about. First of all, talking about the labor force. We've heard the stories about COVID-19 affecting farm and meatpacking laborers highly. 50% of those laborers are often undocumented. Grocery clerks, stockers, similarly been hit, and they're all considered essential, and yet they're all making minimum wage or barely above minimum wage. What do you feel? And we're going to start with Dylan this time. What do you feel can be done about these minimum wages? Is there something that the Congress can do about the tipped minimum wage as well? Let's try and cover the whole gamut of wages there if you can in one question. I know it's a big one there, but maybe we'll break it out if you want to.
Sure. I think the congressman actually just brought up an important point where small businesses still need a lot of help. That's actually why I found it completely stunning that the Democratic proposal for the most recent bailout includes $0 for small businesses. I've been saying for a while, Congress's position that it's places are too big to fail. That's a marketing slogan for golden parachutes. Their real position is that mom and pop places are too small to care about. Now, specific to labor, what we have had in this country fundamentally over the last 50 plus years is a decrease in the amount of money labor takes home relative to the amount of money corporations take in. During that time period, shareholders have seen an increase in income. What this means for laborers is they have decreased negotiating power and they have decreased buying power. You have to flip the entire economy from inefficient trickle-down economics, where shareholders get tons and tons of money and they slowly spend a little bit here and there. And we have to have what I call gush up economics. Gush up economics is the concept that families need more cash. People need to have more of their money come home. They don't need to be squeezed. And the way that you can avoid that is by expanding the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit. You move payroll taxes onto corporations while raising the minimum wage, including the tip minimum wage, to $15 an hour. And you decrease taxes on the first $50,000 of income. When you do those things, each one of those individually is only a couple $100 here and there, but in aggregate on a monthly basis, that's several $100. Now, that's several $100 for 500,000 people in Congressional District 2. In aggregate, at scale, if everyone has a little bit more money, if everyone has a little bit more power to work when they want to work, to negotiate with their boss, to go out when they want to go out, what we'll see is that gush up phenomenon. People will spend more locally. They'll spend on small businesses. When small businesses see increased revenue, they return those revenues to the local economy. They use local contractors. They hire locally. Now, again, local people get another dollar. That's a multiplier effect. That's why it's a gush up proposal. And that's really what Congress has been doing wrong for the last 20 years at least, is they've been so focused on making sure that the top of the economy is perfectly fine. The bottom of the economy, where the vast majority of us live, are just scraping to get by. Now, we were doing okay. It was just barely tolerable up until the pandemic, and the pandemic just laid everything clear. I mean, it's crystal clear that our system has failed us, and it was designed to do this. That's the real problem.
Congressman?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. So, first of all, I completely agree that wages are too low. And right now, it really is outrageous that someone has to earn 2 or 3 times the minimum wage to be able to even afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment. That's why earlier in this Congress, I was proud to support the Raise the Wage Act, which would increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. No one should be working a 40-hour work week and be living below the poverty level. We need to change that. For more immediately, though, in addition to have voted for the Raise the Wage Act, in the most recent aid bill that Congress voted on, the HEROES Act, a couple things. There was an additional $1,200 in there per family member in economic impact payments, up to $6,000 per household directly in people's hands. So it's vitally important that we pass that bill. It would also provide, it does provide additional support for small business. It'd be $10 billion for small businesses, emergency grants through the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, and also there'd be money in the $175 billion in new housing support to help people pay rent, mortgage, and utilities. And then there's also another $100 billion in there, $100 million, I'm sorry, $100 million in disaster assistance to assist fishermen, who are also a vital part of our economy, and especially part of our culinary scene here in Rhode Island. Obviously, the fishing industry is part of our identity, just as much of any other aspect of our culinary food economy. But we have got to work harder to help the middle class not only survive but grow. And assistance with a higher minimum wage is absolutely critical, as is getting money to people's hands right now. It's another reason why we had included additional support for those who are unemployed. You know, that's a scary thing. If you're unemployed right now and you don't know how, when your job is coming back, if it's coming back, you've got to be able to provide for yourself and your family. And providing the additional $600 per individual if they're on unemployment was a big help. Now, some people have criticized that as too generous. Certainly, we can talk about the next round, whether it should be the same or some modified version. But it had both two effects. One, put money in people's hands right now so that they can get by and get through this rough economic patch, this health crisis. But also, it had a stimulative effect. We're a consumer-driven economy, and so we want people to be able to buy the products that they need, spend money in the economy. When people are buying products, it creates demand. When you're creating demand, obviously, companies are employing people to produce the products that we need. So we need to keep that cycle going. So that's why the extra 600 was so important to help people get through this rough time right now. And we're trying to extend that in the HEROES Act, as well as the additional $1,200 in stimulus payments direct to individuals.
All right, Dylan, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, a couple quick points.
The wage. Go ahead.
Sure. The first thing is that insufficient wages is not a new problem. I mean, people have had an insufficient minimum wage for at least 20 years, and we're just now kind of kicking around the idea to do something about it. I don't know why we've waited so long. The other thing is a one-time stimulus isn't enough because we can't trust Congress that they'll do the right thing again, as we see right now. We don't know whether or not anyone's going to get a stimulus again. So one-time stimulus payment isn't actually stimulus. There's incentive to hold on to that money, to save that money and not spend it, because you don't know what your future is like. So a regular stimulus payment is absolutely necessary for the duration of the pandemic. The other problem with the $600 bonus on the unemployment is what we learned from the Great Recession is long-term unemployment is difficult to recover from. So we're actually hurting workers by giving them money only if they take unemployment. If we did regular stimulus instead, and we used a back to work share program, which reduced the amount of hours people were working per week, still gave them full compensation. On top of that automatic stimulus, people would have the money they need. We'd have the money flowing to the economy. We'd be dealing with reduced demand, with reduced hours worked, as opposed to reduced jobs, so that we maintain employment, so that people don't lose out on the economy, not just today, but in the future. When we start to recover, they won't have been unemployed for massive amounts of time, which are risky.
Could I make one other point, Dave? There's one thing I left out, which is really important. All those great things that I outlined in the HEROES Act, the additional stimulus payments, the aid to small businesses, the additional help for those who are unemployed. We passed that bill. The Democratic-led Congress in the House passed that bill back in May. That bill, like many other good bills, have been left to die and are languishing on Mitch McConnell's desk in the Republican-controlled Senate right now, which is beyond frustrating. There's a guy who's absolutely
and yeah, whichever one of you is in Congress, clearly you'll have to deal with that. I realize that's a pain that I don't know how you have to how you can handle it, to be quite honest with you. but you mentioned the Raise the Wage Act that you voted yes on, Congressman, and I know in that act there was alterations to the tipped minimum wage system, and I think what people are seeing, especially with the 600 added on to the unemployment, is tipped minimum wage workers aren't making what they used to make because servers in restaurants with 50% capacity, there's no way to make that up. So I wanted to ask both of you. We'll start with you this time, Congressman. Your thoughts on specifically on the tipped minimum wage, and is there something the Congress can do to change that system?
Yeah, we really need to look at that. It's always baffled me, to be honest with you, that that tipped workers get such a lower minimum wage than other people. I certainly would be in favor of supporting a minimum wage that is much higher and really on par with the minimum wage for everyone else. I don't think that we should have a distinction between tipped minimum wage and the regular minimum wage. So I'm open to hearing arguments why we shouldn't just have everybody treated equally on that. But I think it would help our servers to earn a living wage, and if there's tips on top of that, good for them. All the better. So I'm open to figuring out how we strike the right balance. It's not something that I've, as I recall, having voted on yet, but I'm certainly open to hearing the arguments about how we strike a better balance so that tipped workers earn a living wage.
Dylan?
Sure. One of the things about the tip minimum wage that's interesting, there are several restaurants that have decided to pivot to a different model where people that attend the restaurant don't tip. There's basically just the cost is just right on the menu level. And one of the things that does that's really important, and this is what a tip minimum wage being equivalent to just a minimum wage, just having a flatline minimum wage for everyone would do, is it creates equality and equity within the restaurant business. Now, anyone that's worked in the business knows that the back of the house and the front of the house are two different realms. They work together, they're two sides of the same coin, but very often the people that work in the back of the house don't have the same amount of money, they don't have the same opportunities that other people have. Oftentimes people in the back of the house are, they're people that are undocumented, they're immigrants, and they're not paid a fair wage. And quite frankly, I hear stories that restaurant owners threaten them with calling ICE and those sorts of things. These are the sorts of inequities that we've built into our system. Whether or not they were designed to do this in the first place is one question, but they are accomplishing these inequities. And a minimum wage that's equivalent for all workers is essential in order to actually giving true equity for everyone.
Thank you. Congressman, anything to add on that topic, or should we move on?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. I think that we have to have a more fair and equitable system. I think it's I've heard that other places around the country do this, to have the servers get a defined minimum wage. It's built into the price of what they get, so they may not be tipping anymore. Again, I'm not an expert on the industry, in the restaurant industry, but I'm open to.
Oh, it's a complex, definitely complex issue.
Fair.
One more, I had Kyle Jensen wrote me with a question that I thought was interesting on the in the economic realm. It's business, but he also mentions how businesses are affected from a psychological standpoint because of this pandemic, and there's so much uncertainty. What kind of things can be done to bolster confidence in small business owners to continue to do business and to continue to grow their businesses? And we start with Dylan this time, please.
Sure. There's a big difference between risk and uncertainty, and I'll spare everyone the economics discussion, but basically, if you don't know what's going to happen in the future, it's very hard to invest. The only level of government that can give predictability to future costs, quite frankly, is the federal government. The federal government can deficit spend. And so there needs to be a series of policies that are put in place which give protections to extend debt for local businesses. Now, one of the ways you can do that in the state of Rhode Island, we've created a non-liquidating receivership program. That's a fancy way of saying that you can go to court to get protection from your creditors without losing control of your business. Now, if Congress focused on that, it could have a loan program that extended debts for restaurants and other businesses generally, but restaurants in particular, that basically kicks out debt payments for a longer period of time. This gives restaurants a fixed cost concept So their view of the world shifts from uncertainty, where they don't know what's coming, to certainty, where they know that, okay, this is exactly what my costs are going to be over time. I know that while the pandemic is going on, my costs won't go up. And that will allow investment, and that will kind of deal with the psychological issue of the pandemic. Again, that's also why you need a monthly stimulus. You can't do it once. If you have a monthly stimulus, people know that that check is going to come. Small businesses know that everyone around them has a check that's coming. Without doing things that are systematic and sustained, you create uncertainty, and the psychological impacts are hard to walk away from.
Congressman?
Yeah, it's going to be a very scary time for businesses right now, not knowing whether they're going to and when they're going to be able to get back to normal operations. First of all, in order for us to be able to get through this crisis, we are going to have more testing, and that's something else that is vital. If we had a robust testing everywhere, it's going to be the key really to opening up the economy and getting things back to normal more quickly. I was very proud in both of the COVID aid packages that we passed to provide a significant amount of some money, billions of dollars, for developing vaccines and also developing antivirals. That's something that's critically important. I think I know we're on track right now toward getting a vaccine soon. I've spoken directly with Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's a friend. I've known him for more than a decade. I called him early on during the crisis, and I asked him his thoughts on, is this the real deal? Where are we going with this? And he said, yes, it looks like we've got a global pandemic on our hands. And then as time went on, we realized how serious this is and the impact. Originally, he thought that we were going to have a vaccine maybe within 12 to 18 months at best if we were going to get a vaccine. He said it's very challenging. More recently, I just spoke to him just a few weeks ago, and Dr. Fauci told me that he is, as he said publicly, that because of the progress that's been made on a vaccine, that he is as a reasonable optimism and confidence that if we're going to have a vaccine, we actually could have it by the end of the year or the beginning of next year. And obviously, if that's the case, it's going to help everyone breathe a big sigh of relief. And that doesn't even mention the antivirals that we're developing and some treatments that, again, will help people to stay alive, keep them healthy, prevent the worst aspects of the virus taking hold. But we're doing everything possible right now, leaving no stone unturned to get through the public health crisis, at the same time making sure that people can weather this economic storm that we're in.
Okay. Dylan, anything you want to add there, or can we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, I would say a big thing about uncertainty in psychology is knowing that your future is safe. And a big problem with Congress is they don't consider anything past the next tweet. Really, we need proactive governance, not reactionary politics. Is this the real deal? Yes. Then why don't we have a plan for schools? Why didn't we develop that back in March when we knew this was a real deal? When we had economic collapses before, why didn't we make plans for the next economic collapse? This constant turning over of reactionary politics instead of proactive governance is why people have lost faith in Congress. And it's why they do not believe that Congress has its best interest at play.
It's a valid point. I think it tends to fall upon other parties in this case that sometimes is causing those difficulties. And I don't want to become partisan here, but since you're both the Democratic Party, we know what I'm talking about. I do want to switch now to health and hunger, and specifically how hunger affects health and that sort of thing, especially you just mentioned schools. So we should touch upon the fact that a lot of hunger, unfortunately, stems for children because they're not getting meals at schools. I'm sure both of you know all the statistics from the food bank and the food pantries about how children are not getting their meals that they should be getting. I pulled some statistics up today. It's really amazing. It's astonishing. It's around 28% of households can't afford to buy the amount of food that they want, with 16.5% of those households with children, which makes it about 14 million children going hungry on a regular basis. And so, there's like I said, there's two parts to this. There's the hunger aspect, obviously, which is a difficulty, but that also causes a health crisis. Congressman, I know there's the SNAP. I pulled it up here. The Increasing Access to SNAP Delivery Act. That's currently in front of you. Can you talk about a little bit about SNAP and ways that we can combat hunger and what's going on there?
Yeah, it's a terrible situation where if any kid is going to bed hungry, it's just simply wrong. In the richest, most powerful nation in the world, that should never be the case. So I would certainly very proud to always support the increases and support for the SNAP program, as well as increased funding for the WIC program, in particular. Family and child nutrition have never been more important, which is why I was very proud to support robust funding in the House passed agriculture government funding bill that passed the House on July 24th. This bill included $68 billion for supplemental nutrition assistance, the SNAP program, as well as $25 billion for child nutrition programs, and another $5.75 billion for the supplemental nutrition program for WIC. So this is something, both SNAP and WIC are things that we have provided support for every year in our appropriations bill. They continue to be a priority for me and for my colleagues. The Family First Coronavirus Response Act, additionally, I should mention that it included more than $1 billion in food assistance for low-income pregnant women, mothers, and young children, and as well as local food banks and low-income seniors. One other program that we did pass in one of the aid bills that we passed was the Farmers to Families Food Boxes program. So this basically would create over 75,000 food boxes containing fresh local vegetables, fruit, milk, yogurt, and cheeses. And for 2020, this basically nutritious local products would be packed into and delivered weekly to Rhode Islanders in need. I joined my delegation colleagues recently in a letter to the Secretary of Agriculture in the program's third round, because they made some changes that might disadvantage Rhode Island. We're asking them to not make those changes, to keep it under the old guidelines, because these boxes would go directly to Rhode Islanders in need. So never should anyone go to bed hungry. I've been proud to support WIC and SNAP every year. Again, it's vital to keeping food on the table for families.
Thank you. Dylan, your thoughts on hunger and SNAP specifically here?
So I remember very vividly when a friend of mine, she's a school nurse, explained to me that how her heart sinks every time there's a snow day, because she knows that there are kids in her school that aren't eating. And just to take that and put it at the scale of a pandemic is deeply concerning. I'm on the board of the Federal Hill House Community Center. We have food banks there. This is something that, I've tried to volunteer my time to try to learn something about and try to do something about it. But this is another thing that it's just not a new problem. This food scarcity, the fact that children in America are going hungry, has been a problem for an incredibly long time. It's been a problem since the country was born. And we still haven't really done anything about it. I mean, the congressman has been in Congress. He's been there for 20 years. And it's been a problem for 20 years. In that 20-year time period, he's passed 6 bills, 2 of which are to rename post offices. We need to do more. We need to do a lot more. And that is the fact that children are still hungry today. This is kind of a moment in America where we have to just take the future we deserve. We have to stop saying, well, we'll do a little bit here, we'll do a little bit there. And we have to work hard. We have to lead. We have to push for greatness. And the fact that children are still hungry today in America is completely unacceptable.
Congressman, response?
Yeah, and I completely agree that it's unacceptable that children go to bed hungry. And this problem certainly has been around far too long. I'm sure Jack Reed, who has been in Congress longer than I have been, has shared that frustration over the time that he's been in office. Before him, Senator Pell or Senator Chafee, and people who've been in Congress for many years, just like the frustration that I'm sure that Senator Whitehouse and Congressman Cicilline, all of us feel this frustration that we continue to look for ways to end childhood poverty, end childhood hunger. The answer to some of it is making sure that we have these vital safety net programs so that no child is going to bed hungry. That we have SNAP and WIC to make sure that the vital safety net is there, while at the same time helping people to climb their way out of poverty, realize the American dream, realize their own path forward. But we're not going to stop fighting for the right resources, because the safety net has to be there when people need it.
Thank you. So hunger is also a huge public health problem. Hunger can cause a number of debilitating diseases. Eating poor nutrition because of your hunger causes obesity, things of that nature. There's lack of access to healthy food. Insufficient incomes obviously affects that as well, which we've already touched upon. I wanted to talk about, hear both of you talk about issues of how health can impact not only all the things that I just talked about, but it can impact our security. I mean, I pulled up a statistic that 71% of today's young adults ages 17 to 24 can't qualify for military service. The Department of Defense spends $103 million per year on lost work days. If you would, Dylan, we're going to start with you this time. I would like, your views on these issues of health. What can be done with health? Obviously, our healthcare system is very complicated and complex. Has been changed many times over the last few decades. Thoughts there on how health, impacts this food economy as well.
Sure. Health impacts every sector of the economy, health and poverty. Medicare for All is basically the only answer that we have that will address all of the issues that we have. So, guaranteeing everyone access to healthcare, and importantly, guaranteeing them access to healthcare outside of their employment relationship is essential for small businesses to thrive. So, A, you have to take care of everyone's health. B, you have to do it in such a way that small businesses have that cost removed from their overhead. This is key for the restaurant industry, without having to cover healthcare for employers, but employees still having access to healthcare makes a much more dynamic economy at the base level. And, at the core of negative health outcomes is still poverty. The core of negative health outcomes is inequity in our economy. Before we're born, our health and wealth can be predicted by our zip code, our race, our ethnicity, our gender, our sexuality. All of those are things that are true of us before we were born. So, healthcare is one portion, but true equity, true freedom, true economic opportunity needs to be a baseline requirement in order for our health outcomes to actually improve.
Congressman?
Two of the proudest moments of my life and all the votes I've taken in my time in public service, the two that really stand out the most, when I was in the legislature and we created the Right Care program in Rhode Island that made us a model for covering low-income people and the uninsured. And we had one of the lowest uninsured rates in the country because of Right Care, especially covering pregnant women. And then the other incredibly proud moment was both voting for and then being at the White House with President Obama when he signed the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, into law. And it totally changed the dynamic of healthcare in America. Not a perfect law, but an amazing start where we changed over from being a fee-for-service health system, but instead then started rewarding providers based on quality of care. And it covered millions more people, made health insurance more affordable, and it got us that much closer. Of course, now, both because of the Republicans in Congress and President Trump, who have done absolutely everything in their power to roll back the Affordable Care Act, to weaken the Affordable Care Act, taking away the mandate, and doing everything they can to make the Affordable Care Act unworkable. It's forcing more and more people off of health insurance, making health insurance more affordable. We have to turn that around. It's why I am so excited about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as our presidential and vice presidential nominees. I am ready to go to this fight and win in November up and down the ticket. I am hoping that we are going to have a sweep, both in keeping a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, and making sure that all the things, the damage that the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress have done to weaken the Affordable Care Act are going to be reversed on day one. I'm hoping, or as soon as thereafter as possible, and we're going to be able to restore the promise of the Affordable Care Act. In addition to that, I'm a proud supporter of Medicare for All. My colleagues have and I have co-sponsored an important bill. I know it's in many ways maybe aspirational and it's down the road, that it's going to take us time to get there, but it's a good opportunity to look at what America could be, healthcare in America could be like if we work hard to get there. And I'm ready for that fight.
Dylan?
Sure.
Anything you want to say there?
Yeah, you know what? I applaud the congressman for his support for Medicare for All. I just, when he talks about it being something that we can do down the road, that's kind of like how child hunger is something we can deal with down the road. There's some things that there's no need to wait. Just get it done.
All right, let's move on. Even though this is a huge topic, health and hunger, I would be remiss if I didn't touch on farming a bit, since I work so closely with the farms here in Rhode Island. And farming here is an interesting realm, because they're much smaller than the farms out in the Midwest. Congressman, you mentioned the CFAP food box program earlier, and I've got a question on that. But I wanted to point out it's also an economic issue, because the median farm income in 2020 was estimated to be negative $1,800, which in Rhode Island it's probably even worse. Then we're also dealing with the entire climate change of the issue, the deforestation, biodiversity, water pollution, things of that nature, which is a huge area to cover that, we're probably not going to be able to tackle this evening as much. But I did want to talk about what you see as, the potential for farming here in Rhode Island, how local purchasing and like you mentioned, the food box, we can go into that a little further, can be a good impact here, and what options there are for farmers in Rhode Island to thrive. And it's Congressman, it's your turn to start on this one.
Thanks. Listen, we all love our local farmers and local produce, and whether it's me going to a local farmers market, or making sure that, when you go to restaurants that buy local, so that we continue to support our local farmers, it's so incredibly important. I mean, who doesn't love a great ear of butter sugar corn during the summertime, right? Or fresh tomatoes and that are grown here locally in Rhode Island. We need to do everything we can to make sure that our local farmers can stay in business and can sell their produce and continue to this proud tradition that is both a New England tradition, a Rhode Island tradition, and it's really one of the things that makes America such a strong country, because we have such great local farmers. Now, too many farms, family farms, are falling by the wayside. They're being bought up by big agricultural companies, and that dynamic needs to change. I'm proud to support legislation in Congress when it comes up and it's moving its way through Congress. It's going to support the local, the family farmer, and that needs to continue, so the family farming tradition can continue. But we've got some amazing farms right here on our own backyard, both small and large, and I've been to many of them, and continue to just look for ways that I can support them in Congress.
Thank you. Dylan?
Sure. So the reason why small farmers are being slowly strangled, and it's particularly true in Rhode Island, is because all of the federal government subsidies go to the largest farms. I believe 10% of the farms in the country get something like 78% of all subsidies. 1% takes about 26% of all subsidies. So this is another area where slowly over time, Congress has decided that the interests of the investor class and mega corporations is more important than the interests of the local farmer, the small scale farmer. That's a particular problem for Rhode Island. Rhode Island doesn't have a ton of Fortune 500 companies. We don't have a ton of billionaires. We don't have, investor class elites walking around. What we have is working families. We have average Americans just trying to do an honest day's work. And, we're making it harder and harder and harder for them to survive. And, unless we actually take a look at how we subsidize large, massive corporations, give them preference over small businesses, Rhode Island farms will struggle just like Rhode Island small businesses struggle. It's the same problem. Over the past 20 years, Congress has systematically eroded the power of the working family and systematically eroded the wage earning ability of the average American.
Congressman, anything to add there?
I think we're pretty much in agreement that we need to do what we can, everything we can, to make sure that local farmers can not only survive but thrive. We want to be able to make sure that local family farmers can continue to grow their products, sell it at a fair price, making sure that they stay in big business for the long haul. It's vital to our food supply, and it's vital to our economy, both locally and nationally.
So I did want to talk about the food box program. It's about to begin its third wave on September 1st. As you mentioned, the USDA did attempt to make some changes, which were not great. And an amendment did come out just a couple days ago that sort of altered the changes that they tried to make. They tried to bump the boxes up to 30 to 40 pounds and meat and dairy of at least 10 pounds. And that could be a lot for Rhode Island consumers, producers, as you mentioned, Congressman. But their amendment is still, it's not perfect. They cut the boxes down to smaller sizes, but they still have very large quantities of meat, produce, and dairy in the boxes, which does tend to play towards commodity farms, which we don't have here. I wanted your thoughts on that and basically other ways that Congress can help get local products. My friend John, I'll just plug it anyway, even though I'm just drinking a yacht club. Any local products like that into people's hands. And Dylan, you can start here.
Sure. I think getting more local product directly into people's hands means putting small business interests over large business interests. And the reason why we haven't successfully done that, it's because people always act in their own financial interests. And, members of Congress don't own small shares of small businesses. They don't have financial interest in the outcomes of working families, but they do own stock. So when we allow members of Congress to trade massive amounts of stock on a regular basis, it's like letting referees bet on games. They have a personal financial interest in ensuring that the outcome benefits large corporations. Until we actually improve the Stock Act so that members of Congress cannot trade single stocks, we will actually see slowly but surely an erosion. What we've already seen over the past 20 years, it will get worse, where we put the interest of investor class and large scale companies over places like Yacht Club.
Congressman?
So in May, I was very proud to join my colleague Shelley Pingree in sending a letter to Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader Hoyer, as well as Majority Whip Clyburn, requesting that the special attention be paid to the needs of small and medium-sized farms when considering additional coronavirus relief legislation. Again, these are the places that need support the most. And I am absolutely in favor of doing more for family farmers.
All right. I wanted to get a few lighter questions to close us out here. This has been really great. I really appreciate both of you taking the time tonight. I just got a few minutes more, and I had a question. Ed Fitzpatrick, who writes for the Boston Globe and is doing Roadmap this week while Dan McGowan is on vacation, sent me a question this morning. He was kind enough to plug this town hall, and he wanted to know your thought on some more local issue. Governor Raimondo's executive orders on the bars closing at 11, that where they can't serve people at a bar past 11 o'clock unless they're at the table. Ed's always been a great local reporter. I support local journalism a lot, so I hope the Boston Globe and all the local sources here do well. So we start with Congressman on this time. What do you think locally? How obviously I don't want you to judge the governor. I think she's been doing a great job under ridiculously difficult circumstances. But what's your thought on some of the choice being made in keeping businesses open and closed?
Yeah, in this right now, we have to defer the CDC saying what are public health experts saying, I speak pretty regularly with Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott, and I have confidence that she has given the governor the very best medical advice in this pandemic. One of the major failures of the country in this crisis is the fact that we have had virtually no leadership coming out of the White House. President Trump has not provided sound leadership for the country. If he followed the advice of health experts and at least urged people to wear a mask and model the behavior by wearing a mask, make sure that we're doing everything we can to social distance. If we follow those guidelines, we'd be doing a lot better. It's why other countries have done so much better than we have on a per capita basis in terms of lowering the death rate, lowering the infection rate. We're now, and sometimes they're down to very small numbers, even single digits of new diagnosis. Look, this virus only survives if it can jump to another host. Unfortunately, we are the host. And if we can keep the social distancing guidelines in place, wearing masks, preventing the droplets, the virus from spreading, that's the way we're going to get our arms around this, and we're going to end this public health crisis. But President Trump and this administration have been an unmitigated disaster, trying to somehow turn people against us, each other, divide us, saying that basically saying that it's in modeling that it's patriotic to do your own thing and not wear a mask, not social distance, pounding your chest and saying that this we're tough and this is the way you survive it. It's going to kill people because of the model what they've been that they have the lack of leadership that is coming out of this White House right now. And by the way, the response has been absolutely terrible too, in terms of why not using the Defense Production Act, both to acquire equipment and then use the Defense Production Act to distribute the equipment where it's needed, both for testing equipment, the masks and ventilators. These are the things that we need real strong leadership. And I applaud the work that Governor Munn was doing. A very difficult job. I don't envy the decisions that she has had to make, but following the guidelines of public health officials is what needs to be done.
Thank you. Helen?
Sure. The real challenge is that we're pitting a public health crisis against individual small businesses. We have to close bars because the public health crisis isn't in a good place, but bars have to be open because Congress failed to provide sufficient support for them. So we're in a scenario where people are going to go out of business if they don't open, and people are going to get sick if they go out. Now, that's a result of a poor system design. If we actually had a plan in place for the pandemic doesn't come out of nowhere. This is something that many people have talked about, that many people were concerned about. If Congress had taken the time to be proactive in how it governed and had a plan in place for what would be done for bars and restaurants when a pandemic came, we wouldn't be in this situation. So the governor's forced to close down places early because of a public health crisis. Meanwhile, they have to fight back because they're going to go out of business. It's a rock and a hard place. That's a result of poor system design. And that poor system design is because Congress prefers reactionary politics to proactive governance.
Congressman, anything you want to add there?
I think we need to have better policies that we're elected officials, people in positions of power are listening to public health experts. That's the best way to respond to this crisis. In the meantime, we also have to not only deal with the public health crisis, but the economic crisis as well. We need to provide support so that people can keep their heads above water, keep a roof over their heads, food on the table right now, and we help our mom and pop small businesses so that the local restaurant that we like going to down the street is going to be open not only today and tomorrow, but well after this public health crisis is done. That's what I'm in Washington doing right now. I'm making sure that the resources are there. I'm going to leave no stone unturned to make sure that those resources continue to flow wherever possible. I'm going to be a yes vote for those resources.
All right, thank you. So we're just about at an hour here. I really appreciate both of you, your time. Another popular question that came through from a lot of people was on the bear realm, which I realize is another huge topic. And a lot of that is at more of a local level than a federal level. But I've happened to either on social or in person seen you both with a bear. I don't want to put you on the spot to name a brewery because we don't want to do that here. But is there a favorite type of beer that you might enjoy after you get off from this Zoom tonight? Dylan?
Sure. I'm a big fan of stouts. I like the dark, heavy beers. And very briefly on the beer front and sort of the Rhode Island restaurant front, in the beginning of the pandemic, I wrote an amendment for the entirety of Title III. It's sufficient. It really dramatically improves economic margins for restaurants and brewers. I'll be happy to give it to you and anyone who wants it.
Congressman, what might you enjoy?
Sure. So first of all, we get some great local microbreweries in the state, and we have some of the brewers actually on my Food First Advisory Committee, and we've been to some of them for a good time and even sampling. But since I'm a warm weather person, I like summer. I usually like any type of a summer ale or a summer beer. So I'll go with that.
All right. And any closing remarks, Congressman?
Well, Dave, I just want to thank you and Eat Drink Rhode Island for the invitation to join in this evening. Obviously, talking about a very important topic. Someone said to me years ago, we really need to rebrand Rhode Island, and where Silicon Valley is known for technology. Maybe we should rename kind of a motto, naming ourselves Culinary Valley because of the great culinary delights and food that we have here in our state. Really, this was an important conversation. I really value the opportunity to share the latest on my work in Washington to help those people to grow and produce and transport and serve the food that they do serve here in the Ocean State and across the country. And it really has been the privilege of my lifetime to serve the people of Rhode Island as the congressman for the 2nd District. And I deeply appreciate your support. I don't take it for granted. I never will. And I don't intend on slowing down. I'm going to continue this fight again to get through this coronavirus crisis and the economic crisis that we're facing. The stakes are high for everyone, and we cannot be timid in our response to the public health and economic challenges that we face today. So I know that families are struggling right now to make ends meet. Workers are unsure of their next paycheck, and businesses are contemplating their future. And I'm not going to rest while they face impossible choices through no fault of their own. So I'm going to use my experience and do everything I can within my power to help. And again, that's why I voted for the CARES Act, voted for the HEROES Act. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank those also who have risked so much for all of us in the last couple of months to help us overcome this challenge. That includes our grocery workers, our nurses, our first responders, and many more. Together we're stronger. Together we're going to get through this crisis, and together we're going to move forward. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Dylan, closing.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. And I agree with the congressman that it was very important and it was a great conversation to have. In fact, I enjoyed it so much. Congressman, what do you say we get together and we have another conversation? Maybe we can have a debate in the next week?
Well, we can always have a conversation. I think this is important dialogue. I'm glad we were able to get together and talk tonight.
All right. So I look forward to doing this again. Thank you so much.
Well, I really want to say thank you again to both of you and your staff for helping us put all this together. I also want to thank the Rockefeller Foundation. A lot of the stats and figures that I used this evening and the information came from a recent report they did called Reset the Table, Meeting the Moment to Transform the U.S. Food System. So you can find that as PDF online. Thank you both for your time. As I said, this will be, sadly, unfortunately, Facebook messed this up, but it'll be on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for people to view after the fact. And just remember, everyone out there, the primary is September 8th. Please go and vote. Thank you both very much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care, Dave.